3 counties, 24 cities, working together, accomplishing more than any of us could alone. Whether your roots run generations deep, or you recently moved to Greater Portland, you are a part of Metro, the nation's only regional government elected by the people. Planning for the future, preserving what we love. Let's keep our region thriving for decades to come.
I'm Micah Reese, and I'm the Dive Safety Officer here at the Oregon Zoo, and safety is a big part of my job. Some of the things we consider here is diver safety. I'm out here at the Oregon Zoo, and you're at the Metro Regional Center. The council chamber is located on the 3rd floor of this building. In the event of fire or fire alarm, please exit through the door in the northeast corner of the room, go down the steps to the 2nd floor, and exit through the main entrance by the reception desk and gather in the courtyard outside the entrance. In the event of a medical or fire emergency, please call 911 and notify the security agent at the front desk. The nearest defibrillator is mounted on the steps leading from the reception desk down to Grand Avenue. Thank you.
Okay, we'll declare a quorum and call the Metro Council business meeting to order. I will now ask our clerk and Mazzini to call a roll for attendance.
Good morning. Councilor Simpson?
Oh, President, good morning.
Good morning. Councilor Nolan?
Harry Nolan is present. Did you just call me?
I did. Thank you, Councilor Nolan. Councilor Gonzalez?
Present.
Councilor Rosenthal?
Yep.
Councilor Lewis?
Present.
And Acting Council President Huang?
Present. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to public communication. We'll open up for public communications on non-agenda items. And could you please describe to the audience our procedures that we use for public communications?
Absolutely. If you are testifying on non-agenda items, now is the time to do so. If you are testifying in person, please sign up by filling out a blue card from the back of the room and bringing it up to me. If you are testifying on Zoom or by phone, please sign up using the raise hand function in the reactions or more menus, or by dialing *9. When it is your turn to testify, I'll call your name or phone number. For those on Zoom, click accept to be promoted to a panelist. Your Zoom window will close briefly before you rejoin as a panelist, and you may turn on your camera if you like. Testimony is limited to 3 minutes, and the timer will begin when you begin speaking. Please state, if you are testifying in person, there are timers located at the testimony table on the wall and on the digital screen. Please state your name for the record before testifying. You do not need to give your physical address. And it looks like today, we have no one signed up in advance to testify. We do not have anyone online, but we do have someone here in person. We have Chris Christensen. Acting Council President Huang, I will note that Mr. Christensen looks like he'd like to testify on a non-agenda item and one agenda item. Would you like him to do that together at this time?
Sure, let's do that.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning, Acting Council President Wang and council members and Metro staff. My name is Chris Christensen. I reside in Beaverton, Oregon. I'm here today to just give a brief testimony on essential alternatives in 2 capacities. Number one, I listened to the online discussion earlier about the Interstate Bridge Replacement Project, and I just wanted to point out some historical data that I thought was interesting. The Markham Bridge is an 8-lane bridge here in Portland that was constructed in 1966 at a cost of $14 million. It provides 8 travel lanes rather than 6, which is proposed under the Interstate Bridge Project. It does not include transportation lanes for transit or for pedestrians, but it is an economical resolution. So I would strongly consider that while we are looking at all the alternatives at this point, we try to find one that is within the budget of the region. It certainly isn't the only regional transportation project or the regional projects that this board has to consider. So I think it's very, very important to look at historical data rather than look at things that are outside of the budget constraints. And I took to heart the comments of the representative from Clackamas County earlier, because they seem to be sort of left out of the decision making. They're an important part of the metro region, yet at the same time this bridge is going to primarily benefit Multnomah County and to some extent Washington and Clackamas County as well. So I would encourage you guys to consider to look at alternatives that are more cost effective and that are within the budget. So that was one alternative thing I wanted to talk about. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the upcoming election. You guys have an important decision here. Unfortunately, the current elected president or the former elected president has left for another position 10 months prior to the end of her tenure. And while there may be some glee in that, I think that it really is a disservice to the voters, as particularly at this crucial time with all the important decisions that are in front of this board. There is an upcoming election. I know Councilmember Gonzalez is one of the candidates. I also happen to be one of the candidates, so I don't want people to think that this is a foregone conclusion. With all due respect, there was a March 12th article in the Willamette Week that indicated that Councilmember Gonzalez would sort of ascend to the throne of the metro region here as a president, and I disagree with that. I think that's going to be left up to the voters, and I plan to be part of that decision-making process. So with that, I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say and learning what you have to do over the next several months, and I wish you the best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And there's no one else, Ann?
My apologies. No, that's it, Counselor.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that, we'll close public testimony and move on to the consent agenda. Colleagues, we have 3 items on the consent agenda today. Item 3.1, resolution number 26-5569 for the purpose of amending 2 projects to the 2024 to 2027 MTIP to meet federal project delivery requirements. Item 3.2, consideration of a February 19th, 2026 council meeting minutes. Item 3.3, consideration of a February 26th, 2026 council meeting minutes. Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
I move consent.
I will second that.
Okay, is moved by Councilor Lewis, seconded by Councilor Gonzalez. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay. Oh, I'm sorry, online. Did I hear ayes online? Okay. I hear ayes online, so the consent agenda is adopted unanimously. We'll move on to our presentations. Item 4.1, Interstate Bridge Replacement Project Update. Our first item today is an update on the Interstate Bridge Replacement Project. This council last heard an update on this project in October of last year. And since then, the program has developed updated information about the cost of the project and funding sources. I will now introduce the team here to present from an Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. We have Carly Francis, Interim Program Administrator, and I see we might have some teammates as well. I'm not sure if they're online, but I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, my name is Carly Francis. I'm the Interim Program Administrator for the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. Online with me here is Alan Kaiser, as well as Brent Baker. I have written notes somewhere, but I can't quite remember them, but I wanted to make sure folks were familiar with their expertise. So I will attempt to remember what I said at JPAC this morning and do my best. They may fill in. Alan Kaiser has been working on risk assessment and cost estimate modeling for 30 years. He's supported Washington State Department of Transportation on many of our cost estimating work with mega programs. And has also done that work both in the region and also nationally. He's been working on projects like the replacement bridge for the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore, as well as the Brent Spence Bridge and between Ohio and Kentucky, and other major marine infrastructure projects. Brent Baker has been working on financial modeling and financial support. He is lead on our team for financial structures. And also, he has been doing that work both for Washington State Department of Transportation for 25 years, as well as nationally and internationally, and so has a broad-based set of information and background in doing that work. So we'll go on to the next slide and provide our report out on where we are. So this is the program map for the 5-mile project area that's been identified to address the 6 problems we've talked about for a very long time, improving in this area. We have received direction from the governors of Washington and Oregon to direct funds that we have towards getting started on this project, which has also been has always been intended to be at the river, getting over the Columbia River first, and then building out from there. So this has always been our vision for the 5-mile program area. Our plan for implementation is to build it out over time, so that vision is going to be realized over time, a little bit different than maybe we had anticipated, but the states are committed to building it. Next slide. So Alan Kaiser will cover the next 3 slides to talk about the cost estimate update and driving factors. Please go ahead, Alan.
Thank you, Carly, and good morning, councilors. The program has released a new cost estimate this week. The estimate was released, communicated as a range for the 5-mile corridor to complete, ranged from 13.5 to 15.2 billion, with a likely cost of 14.4 billion. The range was developed through a probabilistic risk assessment for the program following WSDOT's cost estimate validation process, or CVIP, which WSDOT has been requiring for all large projects for nearly 25 years. This type of risk-based estimating process is also required by both the Federal Transit Administration and their Federal Highway Administration for projects of this nature nationally. So the range that was developed is communicated in terms of percentiles. So the 14.4 billion is a 70th percentile. So we use a technique called Monte Carlo simulation to model 10,000 potential futures for the program, and of the 10,000, 70% of those 7,000 came in at a cost of 14.4 billion or less. 30% of those came in above that figure. The 13.5 to 15.2, that's a 45th to an 85th percentile range. That's the metrics, the parameters that WSDOT is currently using to communicate ranges of projects like this. The 14.4 billion in a risk-based estimate is comprised of 3 main components. The first is we call the base cost estimate, which is the cost estimate in current dollars with no allowance for risk or inflation, assuming everything basically goes as planned. 7.8 billion of the figure is in that component. There's 4.2 billion for risk, which is to account for uncertainties and issues, problems, events that may or may not occur through the life of the project and affect the cost. And then lastly, escalation of 2.4 billion is the cost to inflate, the factor to inflate the cost from current dollars to the point in the future when those dollars would actually be expended on the various contract packages and the year of expenditure. And so that's 2.4 billion. So that range contrasts with the range that was communicated in 2002 of 5 to 7.5 billion with a likely cost of 6 billion. The 6 billion was a 60th percentile, which was the point that WSDOT was utilizing to budget at the time. The 14.4 billion is a 70th percentile, so that's consistent with Federal Highway Administration requirements for major projects, so it's a slightly more conservative estimate. Next slide, please. So this slide is depicting the highway cost construction escalation that's taken place over the past decade or so. I'm sure council members are well familiar with this, but since the COVID pandemic around 2021, the nation has experienced a sustained period of double-digit annual cost escalation in highway construction projects. This slide is depicting an index that's maintained by the Federal Highway Administration called the National Highway Construction Cost Index, or NHCCI, which measures essentially the cost to construct a highway project nationally over time. So when the previous 2022 estimate was being prepared, we were at what turned out to be the beginning of the early stages of this multi-year spike in escalation. The NHCCI was at an index value of 2.04 at that time. When this estimate was being prepared in mid-2025, the estimate or the index was at a value of 3.21. So that's a 58% increase in just a little over a 3-year period, which is, again, this is a national figure for highways in general. You know, anecdotally, looking at some of the marine large marine bridge projects nationally, some of the publicly communicated numbers are even higher than that. So I think everyone's familiar with this backdrop we're facing. Next slide, please. So some of the specific factors driving the increase in program costs from 2022. We've spoken about escalation. There's the national increase over the past 4 years, the 58% nationally. That's one part. The other part is looking ahead. The previous estimate relied on a Washington state forecast of inflation, which was fairly optimistic. I would say the current estimate is utilizing an IBR specific inflation forecast that looks at the programs, the material, the breakdown of materials, labor and equipment to be utilized on this particular program, and also reflects market conditions in the Portland, Vancouver region. So that results in higher year of expenditure estimates for the program. The second component is the schedule. The program over the past 4 years has had the opportunity to take a hard look at the schedule. There's been two components in the schedule extension. The first is the time to complete NEPA review on the program, extended by 2 years due to the need for additional studies and reviews during that period, including looking at a movable span option, looking at some transit modeling assumptions, river user navigation, and factors like that. So that was a 2-year delay. The other part of it is the program had an opportunity to take a hard look at the sequence of delivery for this complex program, looking at how does the work actually need to be sequenced in order to maintain traffic throughout the corridor, and develop a sequence of contract packages that make sense, that industry can support. And that resulted in a 9-year delay to the overall construction duration for the program, due to a need for a much more sequential set of delivery, or sequence of delivery, than had previously been assumed. So that obviously the additional time results in additional escalation for those future costs, and also additional duration of program administration and the carrying costs of a program such as this. The third component is the program has had the opportunity to develop a wholly new cost estimate. The prior estimate that was communicated in 2022, the program hadn't had the opportunity to really do a deep dive and looking at the engineering, some of the quantities, actually many of the quantities that were included in the 2022 estimate had been literally just carried forward from the old Columbia River crossing program, just simply escalated up over a decade, and the program just hadn't had the opportunity to really go back and dig in and revalidate some of those assumptions and some of those quantities. So that's been done. The program's also updated pricing on key items to reflect market conditions in the region as of the present. And also other factors. We did the program completed a comprehensive risk assessment for the project. There was a risk workshop. Over 400 risks were identified and discussed. Some of the top risks on the program include, obviously, schedule. Maintaining for a program like this, keeping it on schedule is critical, and there's a series of potential delay risks that still remain that the program is working to manage. Market conditions remains to be a question in terms of how will industry respond to solicitations, and how will industry's opinion of pricing potentially differ from the program's opinion. So those are some of the key risks. And then lastly, I mentioned before, the prior estimate was based on a 60th percentile probability, whereas the revised estimate's a 70th percentile. So it was a slightly more conservative estimate. So with that, I will pass it back to Carly.
Thanks, Alan. On the next slide, The other component of updating a cost estimate with respect to this cost estimating validation process is you also look at schedule risk and understand what a new schedule is as an input and also what your expected timelines are coming out. What that means is we are updating certain schedule activities as we are publishing this cost estimate information. First of all, we are working actively currently to get the final supplemental environmental impact statement complete with the federal government so that we can get that issued, and also completing the record of decision. That is the approval point for moving forward with construction. And there's actually a key role related to JPACT and Metro Council that we're seeking partnership in around that body of work. They are seeking to have information that demonstrates fiscal constraint, which means a Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program update that trues up the work we plan to do and the costs that we have, or the money that we have to do it. So that's an ask I'll speak about a little bit more later. We are also working to animate construction and get that underway. So that looks like putting out a request for qualifications under a progressive design build model by midpoint this year, and then to put out a request for proposals by the end of this year. That allows us to work on selecting a contractor and conducting contract award and negotiations in 27 and starting bridge construction in 2028. The toll commencement timeframe is also pushed to align with that start of construction for the type of tolling that we would do under federal approval. You do look to see that the timing of construction and the timing of toll commencement are aligned. There's a 6 to 7 year construction horizon anticipated with the bridges and getting them connected up so that they are serviceable to the public. That timeframe will get solidified as we have a contractor on board and confirm that up with folks who have the means and methods to do the work. We are targeting a full funding grant agreement with the Federal Transit Administration in 2030, which would allow then the transit construction to begin in 2030 and extend through 2036 to get operational light rail to Vancouver. Next slide. Just highlighting here some of the critical activities between now and the end of September. The end of September is critical to the program. There is the Bridge Investment Program grant that we have been awarded as $1.5 billion. Over $500 million of that is on the line to disappear if we do not obligate those funds by the end of September. This is why we need your support and help in sort of working on the STIP and MTIP amendment updates, because those are a critical factor to the federal government to publishing our record of decision. Following that publication of record of decision, we have multiple tiers of review with the federal government that we have to work on our initial finance plan, and also then working on reviewing and firming up those amendment agreements with respect to the Bridge Investment Program and also the mega grant program. So there's some sequential activities there, and we need several months to sort of make sure that those review processes can be completed with the federal government so that we retain that $500 million. Also noted here is the intent to begin the work on procurement. Go to the next slide. So how do we get started on a program like this? $14.4 billion is beyond what we have in funds in hand right now. What we've been identifying is a core set of projects. That is not completely fully funded, but it does represent sort of getting some of these initial steps underway and meeting core components of program goals and outcomes. That includes getting a replacement set of bridges over the Columbia River, connecting them into I-5 as well as Hayden Island and SR-14, extending light rail into Vancouver to a waterfront station, and removing the existing bridges. There is still funding needed to complete all of those activities, but working on setting up a game plan on how to do that. What is critical is that initial finance plan that I mentioned does actually have to have a funded phase identified in it that matches with the funds that we have. So we do have to match up costs and funding so that we can put that in as a funded phase. That initial finance plan, it gets updated every year, so we have the opportunity to adjust it over time. But also it has to have that independent utility for what you're looking to spend in that first iteration of it so that we can advance to securing the obligation of grant funds. Next slide. So this is a map of what that phase one core set of projects would look like. In black here you see the replacement bridges and their connections into I-5 and SR-14 and Hayden Island. Those bridges include space for light rail on the southbound bridge, so the one towards the top of your screen here. That is dual track, so 34 feet. On the northbound structure, so the lower one on your screen, that includes a shared use path so that bicyclists, walkers, mobility users, other rollers can get across without being on the shoulder of the highway, which we never like them to be. There are shoulders on those facilities. There is the expectation of bus on shoulder to be accommodated in those shoulders. The other thing you see here is removal of the bridges in that maroon color. And then the transit improvements that are listed here, there is a body of work at Marine Drive. We do need to grade separate Marine Drive from a light rail track so that those trucks and the light rail don't have to interface. That also requires building a bridge over North Portland Harbor, extending space across Hayden Island, also building a Hayden Island station and then connecting into the bridges, as well as then on the Vancouver side, building that waterfront station on that side of the river. The cost for this set of improvements is $7.65 billion as envisioned by the cost estimate right now. And on the next slide, then we'll talk about what it looks like to sort of match up for an initial funded phase that we're looking to target to put into the document with the federal government later this year. So that specifically focuses on the black that's on the slide. So that's replacing the bridges, getting them connected into I-5, and sort of doing that as a core set of activities, the very first phase, first step. The cost for that set of improvements is $5.9 billion. Both this and the other set of improvements that I spoke about both include pre-completion tolling as well as tolling at least until bonds are repaid, which is a many-decade process. So that is a core component both of funding for the program and also managing traffic. Next slide. Critical for light rail and getting it across the river, first and foremost, is building the bridge right so that it has space. There's really no other way to get it across that main channel of the Columbia River. Building an independent bridge for light rail would be exponentially more expensive. Secondarily is working to continue the work we are doing with the Federal Transit Administration to secure up to $1 billion through the Capital Investment Grant Program. We are actively working on that now. We are in their first phase. As you move through their phases of development, you gain more certainty about being awarded those funds. We are looking to put in a request to move to the next phase later this year and move into that phase in 2027. As I mentioned earlier, targeting that full funding grant agreement in 2030 and construction of light rail to get it operational from 2030 to 2036. Next slide. So I'm going to turn this over to Brent to talk for the next 3 slides just about how we match up the money that we have with the costs. So Brent, I will ask you to go ahead. I'll also ask for a time check right now so we know how much more time you have on your agenda so we manage time effectively to.
No, you're good.
Okay, great. Go ahead, Brent.
Great. Thank you, Carly. Good morning, councilors. Brent Baker. Let's talk a little bit about the available funding and what we have to put toward that first step or step 1 of the core set of projects that Carly mentioned. I'm going to first drill into the 2 federal grants that we have at the top of this table. Federal discretionary grants include a $1.5 billion FHWA Bridge Investment Program or BIP grant and a $600 million USDOT mega grant. Those grants have both been awarded. However, while we have that commitment, only $10 million of the mega grant and about $2 million of the Bridge Investment Program grant funding is currently obligated, and that is for design purposes. So one of the key steps that we need to do this summer and getting to is to amend those grant agreements so we can obligate additional funds under these grant programs, particularly in advance of that September 30th deadline, where we will potentially lose a portion of the funds under the Bridge Investment Program that Carly had mentioned. I'm going to now drop down below the black bar there in the middle of the chart to the Federal Transit Administration Capital Investment Grant. Just acknowledging and building upon what Carly said, we are in the process for that and anticipate to be awarded a $1 billion full funding grant agreement under that program. That program would we are seeking to enter into the next phase, which is entry into engineering and out of project development. And that would lead us to a full funding grant agreement no later than 2030, with those funds becoming available in perhaps the summer of 2030. I'm going to move back up in the table above the black line, which again, that represents the $5.45 billion of funding that we have currently committed. We do have commitments from each state of $1 billion in addition to previous funding that got the program underway. And we also have a placeholder estimate for toll funding of $1.25 billion. The toll funding in particular would be used to pay for eligible highway components such as the Columbia River bridges, the approach connections to I-5, and or the existing bridge removal. That $1.25 billion in funding is sort of our baseline safe bet assumption. Analysis of additional toll funding and what might be possible within, to leverage the tolls further within the rates and policies currently under consideration by the two state transportation commissions is underway in both states. And results from that will be forthcoming later this spring. The toll funding actually comes sort of in two parts. The first part is bond or loan proceeds. So what we basically borrow against future toll revenues. And that is assumed to be available based upon our financial plan on when we would need to borrow in fiscal year 2032 or maybe midway through calendar 2031. And then the remaining part of the toll funding comes as net toll revenues that are collected from pre-completion tolling up until that point of borrowing. We expect tolling to begin in 2028, concurrent with visible construction to meet FHWA requirements under Section 129. To have tolling start when we're actually working towards something we're building with the tolls. And those funds that are collected initially will be used directly toward construction. On the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about kind of the pathway to getting to that core set of projects, which includes the Columbia River Bridge with light rail service to the waterfront station in Vancouver. So that's the $7.65 billion scope of work. So starting back with kind of where that step one was that Carly mentioned, replacing the bridges with space for light rail transit and connecting them to I-5. That has a cost of $5.9 billion, and currently with the funding we have committed leaves us with about a $450 million funding gap, where we would start needing additional funds to fill that gap in 2032. We do believe that is a gap that can be surmounted through possibly additional funding and cost-saving opportunities, because we need to get to this step one, if you will, to be a balanced, financially feasible phase for the funded phase in our Federal Highways Administration initial financial plan, which Carly references a prerequisite for getting those grant funds obligated. Now, as we step beyond that step one to adding operable light rail transit to a waterfront station in Vancouver, and we add in the cost of removing the existing bridges, that increases our funding gap from the 450 that we again hope to shave down to zero, but that increases it to 2.2 billion, or assuming the anticipated Federal Transit Administration capital investment grant of 1 billion leaves us with a need to secure up to another 1.2 billion. And more work to be done on that. On the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about some of those strategies. So I think first and foremost, we're going to continue to identify cost-saving opportunities, including design refinements, value engineering, and risk management. I think that's just part of the mantra of the program, is to see how we can achieve the same objectives with and function with lower cost solution. We're also going to seek to increase the toll funding based upon the forthcoming analysis. We'll have answers on that in the not too distant future, and that will help us understand what's possible within the existing rates and policies that are currently under consideration by the two state transportation commissions and their work with the traffic and revenue consultant on the level 3 traffic and revenue study. Additionally, we will continue to pursue that multi-year process towards seeking that capital investment grant of $1 billion from the Federal Transit Administration. We believe we're well poised for that, and we'll continue efforts there. We do expect to pursue future federal grant funding through applicable options such as the USDOT Infra and Build grant programs. So far, we are 4 for 4 on federal grants ranging from $1 million to $1.5 billion, and we will continue to seek additional opportunities there. And finally, we do plan to work with each state and the region to consider other cost savings, funding, and financing opportunities. And so with that, I'm going to turn it back to Carly.
Thank you, Brent. We'll move to the next slide. So as we've covered a little bit already, we do have continued work with our executive steering group. We met with them earlier this week. We are working to complete the NEPA process and have spoken briefly about the critical role that we're seeking partnership with JPACT and Metro Council on to get that record of decision. Updating that finance plan is critical to being able to advance activities and to secure the funds so that we don't lose that $500 million in funding. And also the transition to construction delivery that requires organizational changes within the office itself to add additional construction expertise and oversight expertise for that body of work, and working to issue those procurement documents. Next slide. So advancing that bridge contract this year, have referenced the timeframes here. The use of the progressive design build model specifically allows for a dialogue between designers and builders early in the process. With the sort of traditional design build model, you price a bunch of risk up front, you get a lump sum cost for the work and the risks that that entity sees. This allows an opportunity where you talk about those things over time, you work to finalize design with them, and it's with folks who have those means and methods to do the body of work. So it's a critical, different approach that I think is going to be valuable. There is the opportunity to find efficiencies in that dialogue, also to manage kind of claims and risk management generally over time, and seeking innovation that they have because of expertise in this body of work. WSDOT is anticipated to be the lead contracting agency. We do have experience with the progressive design build model up in the Puget Sound area and are translating that expertise into the project here. That does then support, and we're working towards these procurement activities in this year to then select a contractor next year, and again, advance to construction in 2028, which will really support sort of core activities like building seismic resilience over the Columbia River, which currently we just simply don't have at any of the crossings that exist for the Columbia River. Next slide. So specific to this near-term collaboration with JPACT and Metro Council, we are looking to amend the 2026-29 MTIP and STIP. We have worked with Southwest Washington Regional Transportation Council. We have a timeline established with them to get that completed through their process by the midpoint of this year. We also have a game plan with the Oregon Transportation Commission to also meet that midpoint of this year timeframe. That's our target as a program. We do need to work with staff to bring that forward here. And that will then very specifically cover that initial step one construction body of work. And so making sure that the dollars match up with the body of work anticipated, that that's a clean connection, and then having that documented in these fiscal constraint documents that we have as regions. So looking forward to that partnership with you folks and keeping that $500 million that the federal government has awarded here, keeping it here so that it can move jobs and money into the region. I think that's the last slide, and we'll be happy to take questions.
Great. Thank you, Carly, Brent, and Alan. Colleagues, questions, comments? We'll start with Councilor Nolan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Could we bring the slideshow back up and look at slide 3, please? Thank you. This $14.4 billion total program amount includes all the interchanges on the Oregon side of the river and on the Washington side of the river. Is that right?
That's correct. It's for the full 5-mile program.
Okay. Can someone explain to me why risk is more than 50% of the actual construction estimate?
So
It's like saying I'm going to build a $100,000 building and the risk is $60,000. That seems excessive to me.
it certainly is a significant component of our estimate. This risk number is derived by a robust conversation among experts that is a core component of the cost estimate validation process. So we start with a workshop, and that discusses, as Alan had mentioned, there were 400 risks identified in that process. Each of those items then identifies, so for example, price of steel. What is the possible variation in price of steel? What is the likelihood of that variation to occur? And what is the sort of potential cost range type impact that that might have? And so that risk factor is a composite of all of that, those sets of data on each of those 400 risks, and calculating that forward and figuring out, of those likelihoods and of the magnitude that's identified, what does that come to? What we're not carrying beyond that is sort of there's this concept in projects where you're maybe at our 30% design, and so you carry a 30% blanket contingency. So we don't have that component in here. We have something that is elicited from that conversation. So it's an outgrowth of that. It is a significant amount of money to have as a risk factor. So your observation is spot on that it is a lot, and it is a result of that process and review by experts both within the program, within the state DOTs, and outside.
Thank you. And have any of the three of you been involved with projects that have come in spending less than the estimated risk at this point in the project?
So the management of risk is a core activity for the program. It's a core expectation of the governors as well. Some of the discussion on Tuesday was about their expectation of good stewardship of taxpayer dollars. I would note at the 70th percentile figure, that presumes we are doing some decent work with risk management. We also are going to do everything we can to manage those risks. So this is, I think as you're highlighting, this is an estimate and an expectation, and the cost could, 69% of the time, 70% of the time or more come in at or below that figure. It is simply just our best understanding looking forward from here about what could accrue. I don't know whether or not Alan or Brent would like to speak to what they've seen in sort of delivery costs in comparison to a plan to figure like we have with this 70 percentile.
And before you do that, Mr. Chair, if I might clarify, you mentioned that 70% of projects would come in under the base cost and risk. Not sure that's the right application of those statistics, but I'm asking if any of the three of you have worked on, had a major role in projects that did come in less than the estimated risk at an equivalent point in the project.
So I'll ask if Alan or Brent have comments to respond to that in their lengthy expertise.
Yeah, I can say I have, and and WashDOT has been using this type of risk-based estimating process for nearly 25 years on all large projects. The Federal Highway Administration has been using this type of process for nearly 20 years on their projects. So I've been involved with many that have come in below that, some well below that, and some have come in higher. So it is, it has this 70% confidence level, and you're right, Councilor Nolan, that it would this analysis indicates that there's a 70% likelihood that this project would come in below that
Right.
that figure with the assumptions that have been made.
So I'm not getting direct answers to that question. So let's move to slide 5, if I might. Scope and quantity updates in the middle of the slide. The way I read this and the way I understood what you said in describing it is, in simple terms, the project has gotten bigger since the Columbia River Crossing Program, which was the basis for the 2022 estimate. What did we add to the project that caused that kind of an increase?
Alan,
Did we add intersections? Did we add, I mean, is it just a matter that we mismeasured how many yards of concrete we needed, or did we add elements to the project that caused the increase in quantities?
So Alan, I don't know if you want to speak to this. I think I would just highlight that this is, I would say what this is trying to reflect is a level of engineering detail and clarity about what's needed to produce different components of the program. There are ways in which this program is sort of a little bit different in its style and its structure than the previous program. But as the previous program information was rolled into the 2022 cost estimate, those things were attempted to be sort of removed if they were no longer relevant. So I think it's largely about engineering detail. But Alan, if you want to speak with any more clarity on that.
No, I agree with that. It's the engineering has been advanced significantly from what was available in 2022. There's a better understanding of what all is entailed to construct the project, and including the sequencing and temporary elements needed by contractors to construct the elements that are shown on the plans. So it's just a better understanding of what's required and what's all entailed to complete that.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I have other questions, but maybe some of my colleagues will ask them, and so I'll cede for now.
Very good, thank you. Let's move with Councillor Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much. Carly, it's been good to see you now 3 times in 24 hours.
You're welcome.
We'll hang out more. So I just want to really lift up some of the conversation that we had yesterday morning, not only around where we're going with the program, but about the actual construction phasing itself, and particular the concerns of those of us along 205 around diversion, and the work that we need to do as a local community to prepare for folks who are going to be taking the 205 bridge and 205 all the way while you're closing down the bridge in phases. So I guess if you could reflect back kind of how you're thinking about the community work for the 205 diversion construction impact segment of the project management.
So I think it's a dialogue that we can continue to have. I would note that there are some unique features with travel choice making right now over the I-5 and I-205 bridge, which inform some of our expectations about what that choice making will look like as we have construction and as we have that toll implemented. This is a little bit comes from my hat of being the Southwest Region administrator for WashDOT before coming into this interim role. What we've seen is that obviously I-5 has been congested for peak hour travel for a long time. 205 was often the sort of easy, reliable side path. What we've seen though in the last several years is that 205 has gotten significantly more congested during peak hour travel. So what we're seeing is folks are already making these sort of odd decisions where they're already kind of coming off of one or the other and choosing the opposite bridge that actually makes sense for their best path. So we're anticipating that some of that actually will correct as we have sort of smoother function on I-5 in the long run, and then that price disincentive. So there's this interesting sort of back and forth set of choice making that we anticipate. And then I think the question becomes, how far do those impacts extend? Absolutely hear and understand the concerns from Clackamas County. I think there's a lot of disbursement of traffic from Clark County as it's moving into all of the employment centers in the area. And so we can certainly discuss what we see as impacts there. I don't have specifics to share with you today. Happy to talk about them again.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that and appreciated you having all the conversation yesterday that also ranged into tolling. In addition, I guess I would say you're coming from the WashDOT perspective, and already, you've discussed how you manage risk, which is different than how ODOT has been managing risk. I think we have something to learn. So I hope that as we continue on this joint project, particularly implementing some of the practices you already have in place, some of the programs you already have in place, including toll collection, that we can continue to be a partner that's interested in bringing those learnings to at least the region, if not the state. Thank you.
Yeah, I just would note that every bridge across the Columbia River that is state-owned is a critical partnership between Oregon and Washington State DOTs. In my role before stepping into this, 6 of the 7 crossings between the states were in my region. And so really recognize the criticality of those. And also I'd say it's a rich, strong dialogue and working relationship between Oregon DOT and Washington State DOT. And part of the opportunity here is actually to, we have a staffed office, and that's sort of a mingling of staff from a variety of places. It offers an opportunity. We have ODOT staff embedded there. There's opportunities for learning. And frankly, within Southwest region, we don't have as much large delivery experience locally, but within Washington State DOT, the Urban Mobility and Mega Programs Office is sort of over the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program now, and we're working to implement some of their structures and concepts and bring expertise from that office into the program as well. So it's a rich learning opportunity for many folks as we work to manage the project forward.
Yeah, thank you. Can I ask one more? So looking at the fact that you've extended the timeline out, it makes sense on multiple funding, money in particular, practicality on another. With that new timeline, how comfortable are you with the alignment with the in-water work windows? I'm involved deeply in a project where we have some pretty tight windows, particularly when you look at when the fish say go, and then you're looking at weather, wind, ice, that sort of thing. So how tight is that schedule? Is it going to be pushed even further because of in-water type regulation?
So the in-water work windows are aware to our, our scheduling folks who are paying close attention to them. I would also note that I think in my recent kind of nerdy conversation with some of the engineers was really recognizing that constructing the false work so that you can work from that to construct the bridges, that's actually probably the core restriction body of work to the in-water work windows. We do have other tools and methods to allow for kind of buffering of some of those impacts so that you can actually do some in-water work outside of that fish window season as well. There's bubble curtains that help attenuate the not sound, but underwater sort of pressure that accrues. We've tested those before, so understanding what work is critical to be within them and outside of them. And I would note that the contracting community is also very keenly aware of those and recognizing that kind of schedule slip and the costs of that. So it's our best target today. Large projects always have some variability in them, but that's really what we're targeting for is in-water work in 2028.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I appreciate Councilor Lewis asking the questions about the diversion and about the in-water work windows. I was going to ask those questions, and those are interesting things. But I could ask questions all day. I have a whole bunch of them. But those two are taken. First of all, just a general question: how many firms do we think would have? Is it a large number of firms that will have the qualifications, the RFQs? Do we expect to get 6, 8, 10 kinds of responses? Or I know of a couple, but there aren't that many that build big bridges. So are we expecting a large range? And then related to that question, do we have any other experience of bi-state design build? I know Oregon has, shall we say, a checkered experience with design build. because I was involved in one of those projects. So I'm a little worried about contradictions between the states in what they want to see out of a design build.
Yeah. So one, this is a progressive design build, so it is a little bit different than that design build model, just generally. So with design build, you usually, you get the design up to a lesser level of design, you issue it out, and then a contracting firm will bid on what they see as actual construction activities, and then they will figure out what all the risks are that they think that could accrue, and they're going to price them right up front. With this progressive model, you get somebody on board and you have dialogue to bring that final design forward together. So it allows for some opportunity and dialogue to manage those risks over time. So I think specifically between Oregon and Washington, we don't have that particular type of co-development experience because the last bridges that were built across the Columbia River was the 205 bridges. So that's, that's the late 70s actually, and opened in 1980. With respect to your question about the contracting community, it is actually one of the reasons why we moved away from design build as an assumed method for procurement of the bridges themselves, because we were seeing that we might limit ourselves to one firm participating, and that doesn't provide any opportunity for competition. We are not expecting a huge field, that is sort of 6, 8, 10. I think we're expecting, sort of hoping for 2 or 3 that would be in that pool. So that's sort of the expectation and understanding right now. And we have regular dialogue with some of these large marine contractors, so have ongoing discussions.
Okay.
And Dan, to answer the question also, nationally, the Brent Spence Bridge, which is between Cincinnati, Ohio, and northern Kentucky, is being pursued through a progressive design build approach. So that's a national example if you want to take a look at that one.
Thank you for that, Alan. I also would note that progressive design build is it's being used. It's a newer model. And so we are also bringing in experts kind of from across the country to advise on how to appropriately, staff up for that and manage that dialogue, because it is really critical to have a good constructive dialogue that you can meet all of that expertise on the owner side with the builder side.
Okay, I can't say that I really understand all the intricacies of a progressive design build. Mm-hmm. Just one other question, sort of, what legal requirements do we have to include the removal of the old bridge as part of this project? And am I correct in understanding that the project is now scoped does not include the extension of the light rail to the library station? Is that correct?
Yeah, so one, the commitment is to bring that forward over time, and certainly Evergreen is which is what the library station or Evergreen location is what it's designated, and there is sort of a transit hub there, so the intention would be to bring it forward over time to that location. It's interesting to note that to bring light rail up, we are moving through the very tightest section of right-of-way that we have for the highway at all, and we're looking to both, we have to build a lot of walls for the highway to sort of help create that space, so it's very tight, constraint space. What you need is co-delivery of that highway body of work to then create the space for light rail to go up to that next station, so it's a significant additional investment on both the highway and the transit side, but it is intended to occur over time. You asked another question, which I've now forgotten. My apologies.
Well, about the old bridge and what is the requirements for removal of that? And does it have to be part of this same package, or can it be done at a later date?
Yes. So the bridges, we won't be able to remove the bridges until we have the new bridges in place and operational, which is expected maybe in 2035. So you really need the funds to come around for that bridge removal in that time frame. So we are programming into the STIP the replacement bridges and their connections, recognizing that that does create, through the bridge permit that we will get from the U.S. Coast Guard, it will create a requirement to remove the bridges to make sure that the navigation channel is open for shipping. So that will be a future activity that we'll need to program into the STIP, but at this time, the governors have directed that we work on funding replacement of the bridges and advancing the program with what we have. So that just creates an activity in the future to fund, which would be about the 2035 timeframe.
But it is included in the estimate, right?
In the, it is included in the 7.65, that sort of core project estimate. In the 5.9, that first body of work that we're going to program into the STIP, once it's at the right level that matches dollars and work, it will not be included in that because the time frame is off for programming current work.
Okay. I have one question. Yeah, I noticed in the timeline that if everything goes, as planned, we might have a new bridge in 6 to 7 years. But I noticed that the light rail opening would be 2036, which is potentially 3 years later.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if you can explain why that is. I think, when I speak to constituents, they want to know that, it's one project, and that, light rail is a key component. And I'm wondering how I should think about that, and also why there might be a 3-year lag between opening and operations of the light rail.
So light rail is a critical component of this program. That's the commitment of the states. That's the commitment of the program overall. And what you need to bring light rail across the river is you need that space on the bridge itself, so you can't kind of complete work until that's in place. But you also have a lot of other construction that needs to occur. We are looking to have you need to have the funds in hand to be able to conduct that work, so the capital investment grant program is critical to that. So that's that sort of target of 2030 of our full funding grant agreement. So that's the timeframe for funds, because you can't contract work unless you have the money for it. And additionally, the body of work, I think there's a space where folks may have presumed that light rail would magically be operating at the same moment that cars were able to drive on the highway. And fundamentally, for the additional work that's needed, it's always been sort of a slightly progressive timeline because of the need to grade separate at Marine Drive, to build a bridge over the North Portland Harbor that is transit specific, to extend that guideway across Hayden Island and build the station, connect it to the bridges, and then also on the Washington side, sort of get it off of the bridge and build that waterfront station. So there's a body of work in there, both that is construction activity during that time, and also I think as you're building operational light rail, you're looking for that sort of test it, run it before you open it to the public. So that's built into that time frame. So there will be concurrent construction, but also it was never just actually going to align to have it be immediately at the same time. But the intent is this is sort of the same kind of time frame we would have anticipated otherwise. That's sort of a little bit of a lag. So it's not dissimilar, it's just we haven't focused at this level on that kind of detail in the program yet. So I think it's not very transparent to folks, but I think it's always been known that there would be a little lag in operational light rail service because of the other work that's needed to get it into Vancouver.
And just so I can help folks, including myself, understand it, if a worst case scenario where we were not awarded a CIG grant on in the first try, for example, on this timeline, what does that mean for a project? And does that mean that you're for all intents and purposes building a light rail ready bridge waiting for CIG, or is it like you gotta have a law to start?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's critical there, one, is recognizing the impressive track record that this region has with achieving CIG grants and understanding what it means to be successful against their grant criteria. So we look to, continue. We have, as I was speaking with Councilmember Lewis on this concept of embedded staff, we also have TriMet staff who are working on the program alongside us. So, certainly we would continue pursuing that because it is a critical component. It's expensive work for sure. We do need a 50% match of those funds that are local or state dollars. So that body of work is there to develop, and we're looking to be successful in that process. Certainly, as it is a core component of the program, if there are bumps there, we'll continue working on the CIG process or looking for other funds to bring it forward.
Not reassuring, but I get it.
I think it's the best that you can do. The CIG process is a very different granting process. It's, this ongoing audit of development. They look to have basically all of your design complete by the time, or substantially complete before you're getting that full funding grant agreement. So it's just a very different, FTA and FHWA have very different approaches to when they provide funds and what level of kind of detail and certainty they have. So matching those timelines up is complicated, and it does result in that kind of difference in timeline.
I'll turn over to Chair Gonzalez, and Chair, if you could also maybe just highlight some highlights from this morning's JPAC meeting as well for the council, that'd be great.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, Chair Wong. Well, Carly, great to see you again as well a few times now this week. First at ESG and now here. like Councilor Wong mentioned, we did have a conversation at JPAC today, and folks brought up, I mean, kind of the similar nature of questions, funding, timeline, outcomes, and generally, though, very strong commitment, I think, around partnership and the recognition of this generational investment and for infrastructure. So I think there's a lot of processing that is still happening with kind of the critical update around the core projects. So I do, I mean, I've reiterated the same things twice, so I'll do them again a third time here. But I do want to just kind of bring some additional things from my colleagues in the council, and I might ask Metro staff to come up as well, because this is an incredibly important few months for this project, and specifically with JPAC and Metro's role, because the action that you're asking us to take has, I think, implications for LPA, for the MTIP, for the RTP. I mean, it's a very significant project for this region, for the bi-state region. And I think importantly, with the hundreds of millions of dollars that are on the line for expiration, also this would get us into construction and actually starting to build, which is, I think a huge thing to really acknowledge. But I might ask Malou or Kelly to join us in terms of, so today's March 19th, and we need to have something to the federal government by July 1st, right? I know you know what it is. My notes are missing here for me, but if we have to work backwards from there, and with the concurrence of the MPO in Oregon, we have JPAC action and then a concurrent Metro Council action. So kind of working backwards from there, can you explain kind of the timeline with the initial update from Carly today, and then what we anticipate being dates for JPAC and for Metro Council? I think it's important to highlight the kind of the timeline.
And so I'll say that we have been meeting with Carly and her team numerous times this week to really start to hammer this out. And so we're working on a draft schedule based on the information that we received to date. But the intention would be that we would start this process likely in an April timeframe, sort of introducing the information for that first time and move it through the public comment process with the intention of getting to a decision in the mid-June timeframe. And so the details we should be able to share in the not so distant future. We just want to make sure that we have all of the detailed information that's necessary in order to kick off that process, which is what we're working with Carly and her team on a daily basis to develop.
Yeah, thank you. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned a mid-June decision. Is that for council or for both JPAC and council?
That would be for both, yes.
Okay.
At this time, based on the information we have, we believe that will be the timeframe.
Thanks. And just for just the sake of general knowledge and discussion, maybe Carly, this question's for you in terms of, can you talk to us exactly all the things that need to be submitted by July 1st and the kind of the chain of decisions that need to happen around the entire ESG and project partners, kind of what's at stake? I know you kind of talked about it through the presentation, but maybe just telling it in a different narrative.
Yeah. So one for the program, and then making sure that executive steering group is kept up to date with that. One is, what is that first step? Because clearly we have a funding gap right now, and so clarifying that, and I think that's part of what Kelly is observing here, is just recognizing that we still have to kind of make those things match. So we are looking for that toll information and possible cost savings information from the team. So that's generating now. We're expecting information sort of later this month, early next month, to round that out and then support the kind of information that we need here. Specific to achieving the record of decision is this fiscal constraint demonstration. There's really two components of that. One is the MTIP STIP amendments, and also the other piece is having some kind of communication because we are out of cycle with the regional transportation plan to get an update. We are out of cycle with that for RTC. We're out of cycle with that for Metro. So recognizing that there's some need for like a letter statement to say this will be in the upcoming updated RTP. And so there's just sort of that proactive commitment to know that it will be there. So that's another action item. I didn't mention that here. It's a little more in the background, but something that's also critical.
Yep.
And then for the program is, I think, one piece in working with the executive steering group is also understanding, as we've brought this information out, which is its own sort of moment for people to regard the situation that we're in with funding and the work, is to discuss construction sequencing and phasing and what that looks like. And so we are already hearing some, it would be nice if it were like this or not like this. We don't have the funds to do that right now, but we can also look at the schedule together and explore what is a time frame on which funds need to come forward to sort of support maybe a different body of work. And so I think that's a dialogue that we want to have with folks. That won't be concluded by mid this year, but I think it's something we need to lean into as we have this information. Beyond that is, the work with our federal partners to get the initial finance plan reviewed and get the the agreement amendment documents completed so we can get the obligation of funds.
Thanks. Great. Thank you. I just thought, thank you, especially for the council and my colleagues, as we know we're going to be on a decision-making timeline here. I just think it's really important for us to walk away with understanding the sequencing that our staff will be working on, and importantly with the project team. So I just want to kind of wrap up with my 3 points that I've been sharing in all of the meetings. So Carly, you've heard this. First, transit. I think to me and to Oregon partners, absolutely essential. And it does mean a lot that in this core project phase, that light rail gets to Vancouver. One of the things that I've learned from my few years working in transportation, which I know is not as much as the practitioners, is that FTA is very formula based, ridership, like very nuts and bolts, meat and potatoes kind of formula around that. And I think one of the concerns that I know that you're going to be looking to address, and one that I just have, is how the core project will perform with it not getting to, I think is the Evergreen station, which is where really the maximum of bus interchanges, et cetera, as you know. And with stopping at the Vancouver waterfront, just making sure that the ridership that we need to perform well is in there. So again, I think wanting to make sure that transit remains a core piece of this project, that cannot understate how crucial it is for me, and I think Oregon partners from the conversations that I've gleaned over the last few years. Second is jobs and shared prosperity, especially with WSDOT stepping up and driving really the project and contracting and leading these major tranches of billions and billions of dollars to be the prime kind of contracting agency as well. I know I am going to be looking for very clear commitments to how Oregonians and Oregon families get jobs for this transformational project, and without seeing something that is enforceable, that is clear, and that I think is fair, I think I'm going to have a hard time expressing my support for it. And then I think lastly, being with JPACT and also having worked on. And also, Carly, thank you for your service to JPACT for many years. So you know this very well on the Oregon side. Is as we are kind of figuring out the funding environment, I guess I'll say very carefully on the Oregon side, for how we fund transit, how we fund our bus rapid transit, our safe routes to school, and also our bridge improvement projects. this project is so large that it almost eclipses a lot of the priorities that I know that my peers on the council hold very closely to our hearts, and that will impact our communities and our constituents. And so, you know, in our ESG meeting with Interim Director Lisa Sumption, with the governor's office, and especially just Oregon leadership, continuing to find ways to make commitments to those projects and how we're going to fund things moving forward. And that this project cannot, in its massiveness, and it just kind of suck up the gravity of all the other things that Oregonians care about. So that is as much for the project team as much as it is, I think, something that a lot of Oregonians are going to be really, really, I think, keenly watching us on. And I think we're going to need to have some answers aside from, we hope things will go this way. Sure. And I think we all have leadership as elected officials to help find the path for that. So those are the three things I wanted to share that I've shared that are very important to me. And I know that we have a timeline here where we have hundreds of millions of dollars on the brink. And I certainly intend to show up as the best possible steward to support this important project. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. All right, we'll go for a second round of questions. Let's start with Councilor Nolan.
Mr. Chair, thanks. I've heard a couple of times mentioned that that the Metro Council, as well as our partners, including JPAC, have decisions to make on a short timeline. Doesn't feel like we've got much decision to make other than say, yes, go ahead, or don't, which is not a truly practical option. So it would help me if someone could explain what options the Metro Council has, what actual decisions we have in front of us. Could we, for example, say we approve this, but we want to shift some of the placement of elements of the project between step 1, step 2, and any future steps, or other ways of describing what discretion we have?
So I think that that's a Metro Council discussion as much as it is sort of a program reality. I think what there is some sort of wiggle room in the discussion about exactly how the bridges connect into Hayden Island and into SR 14. There may be some adjustments there, but I would say at this point for getting under construction, one, we have to build the bridge over the Columbia River first, and building it right for light rail is really the essential first step for light rail. And I think that's what we're going to have funds in that first amount of money to do. So ask is really to work on programming that into the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program. The other piece of this is just recognizing the work that we have with Executive Steering Group and with all of our partners locally over time to figure out if there are different priorities about additional work and how and when we do that. And as long as it sort of fits and you don't create something that doesn't go anywhere, I'm happy to have those dialogues moving forward. Again, that's why we're expressing sort of that core body of work that's so essential as getting the bridge started so that it has a space for light rail, and then working to have the extension come along so that it lags at a sort of anticipated amount that it's always been expected to sort of need an additional amount of construction time to bring forward, but having that be sort of very next step. I would say with respect to when funds are needed, the next additional funds are needed for sort of light rail to keep pace with that anticipated 2030, 2036 construction horizon. The final thing is then funds for the removal of the bridges.
And when do thank you for that. And I appreciate, Carly, that in your mind, the notion that light rail would follow by some number of years may have been fixed from the beginning, but I don't think the general public and its elected leaders have had that same understanding.
I absolutely agree with you. I know that it's not commonly held, and I think it's been as you talk about a large project development, you sort of start at a certain level of information, and we're getting to a different level of information. So I agree with you.
Great. Where in the sequencing do you have the intersections that are 2 and 3 miles away from the river?
So the interchanges, I don't have that information right in front of me here. In the CVIP report that's posted on our website, we do have that information about if we had funding on the timeline to meet the sort of construction game plan that is outlined there and is planned for. There is a set of information for when work at Marine Drive, for example, would happen, when completion of interchange work would happen on Hayden Island. So there's a timeline of all of that that's baked into the CVIP report. We can certainly pull that out and share that with you. I don't have it in front of me currently.
So I'm very much aligned with what Councilor Gonzalez said, and Council President Huang alluded to that this body has been clear for at least 5 years that I've been engaged that we think this project integrally includes mass transit between Portland and Vancouver, light rail between Portland and Vancouver. When would be the right time for us to say, we want that funded and constructed before more distant interchanges are improved? If, for example, we wanted to. Councilor Gonzalez referred to, we need something that has enforceability to it. That's one way that there could be enforceability.
I think that certainly that's a discussion for the council to have. And also I think that's what you're seeing reflected in that first phase core set of projects, is trying to make sure that that very next set of funds really focus on getting light rail across the river. So I think statements like that are helpful kind of at any time to sort of emphasize that kind of progression is of value to this body. So I think at any moment.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I'm not talking about sending a message about values. I'm asking when, if we wanted to insert an enforceable clause, when would that happen?
And maybe we'll have Councilor Gonzalez jump in, I think.
Yeah, if I could help with I think it's a good question, Councilor. I was been able to talk with Kelly about a lot of similar things that you have, so to kind of hopefully help get the question answered. I think with the core project phase, it's $7 billion ish. I think that is important to acknowledge that $7 to $8 billion worth of improvements are not in the core project phase, and so those have been phased into the future. Kelly, my understanding from the conversations that we've had is that in order for light rail to get to the Evergreen station, there's like a lot of huge things that would need to happen in terms of the built environment, and maybe you could describe those and the reason that light rail cannot go without all of those other major improvements to Evergreen. They're kind of all linked together, and so if you could help us think through that, and then how funding, to the question that Councilor Nolan has made around, like, I don't know if it's like a clause or some kind of linkage. It's all contingent on future funding, but that really helped me understand a lot about why we could not go as far as we wanted.
Yeah, I'm happy to sort of begin that conversation. I do think it's one that is helpful with the visuals, so I would also invite a more in-depth conversation where I could show you a 3D image, because I feel like that is really helpful for this particular conversation. It's very clear that all of the partners really want to get to Evergreen. It's a very important terminus location. However, in order to construct that last piece of light rail from the waterfront to Evergreen, there also needs to be improvements to the highway. And that highway portion isn't included in the core project. And so if you were to just construct the transit extension from the waterfront to Evergreen, you would need to shift in such a way that you would have many more impacts to the current built environment in the city. And so I do think it's a really difficult conversation because, again, the right terminus is Evergreen, but just given the phasing of this program, it's not sort of viable from a design perspective in this time. And the conversations are getting started with our friends at the Federal Transit Administration, and we have an incredible team at the IBR who will start to really dig into all the details that are necessary in order to be a lead contender and garner those funds from the Capital Investment Grant Program. But at this time, we don't have all of those details other than a very strong commitment to wanting to put our best foot forward in order to begin that process to design and sort of quantify what it would mean to have a terminus at the waterfront in the short term, with the intention always to get to Evergreen.
Thanks. Yeah, and thank you for allowing me to ask for and now back to Councilor Nolan's question, which I think is a very important question, but there was some context and I'm like, oh, I've heard this and I want it to kind of help color the answering of the question that I think does need to be answered.
So I think I attempted to stab at the question of what's the right time for an enforceable clause, but I think that may also be sort of a council question here. I think I can't speak to what enforceability really looks like in this context. I would have to sort of explore that and understand it better to speak to it with strong knowledge. Happy to do so. Okay. But I think that's also a question for how and when the council wants to shape their actions.
Yeah, I think, I think this council wants to lean in more on learning and getting off of information and facts. So this might be a great work session topic where you can actually bring those designs so we can understand what's now being proposed in the infrastructure, which might help with the timeline of like where a potential enforceable clause might come up. So if we can maybe put a pin in that for now, but invite you back between now and June for a work session on what the current schematics are, that would be very helpful.
I think that's a great idea.
Great. Seeing hands up or thumbs up from Councilor Nolan. Thank you. Councilor Rosenthal.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just one question that keeps nagging at me, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm understanding that the core project, we're still, from what's on paper in terms of committed funds, we're about $500 million short. And we're going to be looking at cost savings, and we're going to be looking at additional potential toll revenue and continuing to pursue federal funds. If those don't happen, is there any chance that, for example, the design build team might say, well, let's just cut off the light rail portion of the bridge and save $500 million there? Or is the most likely option that then we'd be going back to the states and saying, we need more money just to finish this core project?
So the intention of the contracts is to actually go forward and have these, although the design is not up to sort of a 60 or 90% level, to go into those contracts with we need these things. One of those things will be that light rail space on the bridge. And getting into that body of work, we are looking to match up the money we have with that activity. We actually have to match that up in the next 4 weeks so that we can work through the STIP process and the MTIP process. So we will have that theoretical sense of things at that time. There are opportunities with the progressive design builder to look for cost efficiencies. And so when we have a actual sort of figure from them, a cost figure for what we've asked, and we've had that dialogue, that comes in, I believe, in late 2027. So that provides an opportunity we would expect probably aligning that with another cost update for the program, because having a contract in hand is far different from having an estimate in hand. So that will give us more clarity. And as a core component of the program, I would say if we were looking to sort of narrow up the bridges, dual track light rail is a core component and needs to, I think is a 34 foot, it's 34 feet across, period. You can't make that any skinnier. There are shoulders, there are other things that one could look at for cost savings. There's also the reality that in narrowing up those bridges, to get sort of significant cost savings out of that, you actually have to reduce, I don't know, the girder line or something. I don't know, the engineers know more about this than I do, but you have to reduce a certain amount to really get a sizable cost savings out of them. So it's dialogue that we'll continue to have, but it wouldn't be on the table to remove that space for light rail.
So if we can't find the other cost savings, eventually we could have to come back to the states for more money to fill up whatever the gap might be.
Certainly, especially at that 7.65 figure to get operational light rail, there is a conversation, both there's sort of the exploration of federal funds there, and also there's a need for state funding additional from what we have. There's also the need for some state funding to be transformed into transit eligible. So there's specific local match requirements to the capital investment grant program that we do need to pursue. And so we'll be working on a legislative strategy related to that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, great. Well, seeing no more colleagues, thanks for spending all morning with us.
Sure.
And I know you were here early as well, so.
That's all right. It was virtual. I got to walk my dog for a minute, so it's great. Thank you so much for the time and for all the questions. We really appreciate the attention and the commitment of support to work with us to keep that $500 million. So thank you so much.
And if we have, further public testimony, I'd encourage folks to come back and check the calendar for other public hearings coming up as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. We're going to move on to our resolutions. Item 5.1, resolution number 26-5553 for the purpose of amending the fiscal year 25-26 budget and appropriation schedule and fiscal year 25-26 through fiscal year 29-30 capital improvement plan to provide for changes in operations. Our next item is a consideration of a supplemental budget for the remainder of this fiscal year. We have staff to walk us through the proposed amendments, and we will also have a public hearing before considering the supplemental budget. Our presenters today are Brian Kennedy, Chief Financial Officer, and Amanda Akers, our Budget Manager. Welcome.
Thank you, Council President Wong, members of the Metro Council. Brian Kennedy, Chief Financial Officer, here to walk through Resolution 26-5553. This is the second of our normal package of 3 consolidated budget amendments that we bring to you throughout the fiscal year. We should have a presentation coming up momentarily.
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Let's move to the next slide. In summary, there are 3 elements of this that we'll be walking through. The first is changes in fund appropriation levels. The second piece is addition of 2.75 FTE. And then the third is a series of changes to our capital improvement plan. Next slide, please. So in terms of changes to appropriation for the revised budget, on the appropriation side you might recall the 25-26 budget, total appropriation is around $1.8 billion. This is a relatively small amendment, adding about 61 million or 3.1%. And then we had about a little over 1,100 FTE positions in the adopted budget, and this amendment adds 2.75. I'll walk through those details on the next slide. So for the FTE changes, these are all in our asset management fund where we are budgeting for our enterprise resource planning system replacement project. This is where we're replacing our core financial and human resources technology. So we're adding 2.75 FTE. This is 2 positions and then increasing the FTE on 2 other positions. Part of the reason for these changes is we were not able to fully determine project staffing until we had both selected a vendor and implementation partner and then completed contracts with them, including developing the project management plan. So this is staffing we need to successfully complete this project. It's a combination of a backfill position in HR to free up some of those HR staff to work on the project, and then increasing FTE in 1 new position on our IT team supporting the project. Next slide, please. Our appropriation changes both involve the Housing Department. The first piece is increasing appropriation in the Affordable Housing Bond Fund by $60 million. We are recognizing additional carryover and then appropriating that for disbursement in the current fiscal year. Basically, some money that we expected to spend last year didn't get spent, so we're recognizing that as additional fund balance this year and appropriating that for disbursement. One of the challenges with the housing bond is we try to build the budget based on the projects we think were going to happen on the timeline, but projects sometimes move at their own pace. So this really reflects a timing change. On the Supportive Housing Services Fund, we are increasing expenses for payments to our counties. This is just coming out of contingency. Again, we try to budget based on what we think the counties will spend in that time. Sometimes things move on different timelines. The kind of uniqueness, as you probably recall, of the Supportive Housing Services Fund is all of this cash is currently sitting with the counties, but because of accounting rules, we have to budget for it when it is spent, not when the cash is transferred. So we are reflecting, this is really a paper transaction in our budget, but one that we have to do. Next slide, please. This is maybe the most complicated piece of the budget amendment. In November, we brought you our first consolidated budget amendment. Because we are diligent and send our staff to training, Amanda realized that we did the November budget amendment incorrectly, that it should have been categorized as a supplemental budget requiring additional public notice. So we are having council readopt that with the appropriate public notice just to make sure that we have fully dotted our I's and crossed our T's. This is an appropriation change of a little over $1 million. Again, just making sure we have the paperwork correct on this one. Next slide, please. As I noted before, there are a series of 29 changes to the capital improvement plan. I'm not going to walk through them in detail. For the most part, these are projects moving in time, so departments are reprioritizing projects based on current conditions. We have some projects moving to be implementation sooner, some moving out later, and then these are just changes in project cost over time. So we are updating the capital improvement plan to reflect the projects that we expect to deliver in the current fiscal year. Next slide has the last couple capital improvement plan changes. And then next slide, I believe we are done, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Brian. Colleagues, any questions?
Just one question.
Yep, go ahead.
Just on the appropriations or the change in appropriations for housing for 60 million, is that necessary to meet current commitments, or does that give us additional monies that we can allocate for projects? Does it give us additional freeboard, you might say?
No, Councilor Rosenthal, these are reflecting approved projects and just updating the timing. So we had expected these projects to move last year. They did not. They're moving this year. So we need to increase our appropriation so that we can make those disbursements to our implementation partners.
Okay. Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much. With the CIP, I know we had been prioritizing some of the energy-related projects that could get federal dollars. Does this updated CIP list include any reflection of change in federal allocation of those types of projects?
I do not believe so. For the most part, for the projects that we were expecting federal money, we have been pretty aggressive in trying to complete those and get our reimbursement requests into the federal government so that we can secure those reimbursements as quickly as possible.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, well, let's open up our public hearing then for resolution number 26-5553. And can you please reread the procedures for providing testimony?
Yes. If you are testifying on resolution number 26-5553, now is the time to do so. If you're testifying in person, you may sign up by filling out a blue card in the back of the room and bringing it up to me. Or if you are testifying on Zoom or by phone, you can raise your hand using the reactions or more menus or by dialing *9. When it's your turn to testify, I'll call your name or phone number, and if you're on Zoom, please click accept to be promoted to a panelist. Your window will close briefly, and then you will rejoin as a panelist. You can turn your camera on if you'd like. Testimony is limited to 3 minutes, and the timer begins when you begin speaking. If you are testifying in person, there are timers located at the testimony table, on the wall, and on the digital screen. And please state your name for the record before you testify, but you do not need to give your physical address. I have no one signed up in advance to testify. I see no hands raised, and I see no blue cards coming forward.
Okay. Well, thank you. Seeing no further testimony, I will close the public hearing and entertain a motion on this resolution.
I'll move 265553 for the purpose of amending the 25-26 budget and appropriation schedule and fiscal year 25-26 through 2930 capital improvement plan to provide for changes in operations.
I'll second.
Great. There's a motion from Councilor Lewis, second from Councilor Rosenthal. Any further discussion? Nope. All right, and can you call the roll, please?
Yes. Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilor Lewis.
Aye.
Councilor Rosenthal.
Aye.
Councilor Simpson.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilor Nolan.
Yes.
And Acting Council President Huang.
Aye, the motion passes.
Counselor,
Thank you.
can I ask something?
Oh, sure, Councilor Lewis.
Brian, could you share with us, you've just been named one of the 250 best public servants in America.
Wow.
Can you tell us about your award and how great you are real quick?
Nice.
I'll answer the first part of the question. This is a program created by the National Academy of Public Administration in partnership with a number of local government professional associations. I believe I was nominated by the Government Finance Officers Association, kind of recognizing my work. I'm honored and happy to be associated with the National Academy of Public Administration. They're one of the premier kind of academic and practitioner kind of supporting institutions around the public administration space.
Well, congratulations, that's a big deal.
Thank you.
We're not present in Roxbury.
Congrats.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Although you are in trouble not telling us.
We have ears everywhere.
All right, well, before we move on to the next item, I'll just start by saying, colleagues, it's a great honor to be serving as acting council president. My top priority is to make sure we have a fair and transparent process for the selection of our next Metro Council president. I just want to be clear also that for myself, I will not be in the running for, the appointment or on the ballot. So I just want to declare that and make sure we all understood that I'm going to call it as fairly as I can throughout this process. And I want to turn it over to Chief of Staff Kristen Dennis to talk a little bit more about any potential conflicts of interest.
Thank you, Councilor Wong, or Acting Council President Wong, members of the council. Again, for the record, my name is Kristen Dennis. I'm the Chief of Staff to the Metro Council. Today, before we take up the next item, I need to describe a potential conflict of interest that could potentially apply to members of this council. In the next item, I will be describing optional timelines for filling the current vacancy in the office of Metro Council President and asking for council direction. The decision about when to fill the remainder of the current Metro Council President term could result in a financial impact to the individual who is ultimately appointed to fill the vacancy. Specifically, the length of time of the appointment impacts the amount of salary that the appointee ultimately receives. So we'll call it like 8 months, 7 months, that's it, some difference there. Not every option I'll be presenting to you would create a potential conflict of interest. It's essentially the fact that we're seeking council direction on a timeline and providing the option for an expedited timeline that opens this consideration up at all. I'll note that the Metro Council President's salary wouldn't start until the swearing-in portion of the timeline, and we may only be talking about a month or so difference. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about this, but at this time, I would recommend that in the interest of transparency and out of an abundance of caution, if you are considering applying for the position, you should now declare a potential conflict of interest. Declaring a potential conflict of interest does not preclude you from participating in the vote and discussion so long as you believe you can make an objective decision as to the timeline. Anything I missed there, Metro Attorney? Thank you. Okay, thanks.
Colleagues, Councilor Gonzalez.
Thanks, Acting President Wong. Well, based on the circumstances that have been described by our Chief of Staff, Kristen Dennis, regarding the resolution and our conversation today declaring the vacancy in the office of the Council President, I would like to declare a potential conflict of interest. And, that being said, I believe that I can be objective as to the timeline and intend to participate in the discussion and vote. And thank you.
Thank you. Any other declarations? Okay, great. Thank you. Well, we'll move on to our next item, which is item 5.2, resolution number 26-5584 for the purpose of declaring a vacancy for the office of Metro Council President. Kristen is still here to lead a discussion about the vacancy following President Peterson's departure last Friday.
Thank you. I have a little slideshow. Thank you. Great, thanks. Again, this is resolution number 26-5584 for the purpose of declaring a vacancy in the office of Metro Council President. As you know, Metro Council President Peterson resigned on March 12th, effective March 13th of this year. Metro Code outlines this process for filling a vacancy, and we are here today to initiate that process pursuant to code and provide and seek direction to staff in undertaking that process for council to make an appointment. Next page, please. Next slide. Okay. So today we're here for kind of the first step. Code requires that Metro Council declare a vacancy by resolution, so that's the resolution you have today. The vacancy must be filled by appointment within 90 days, so we have some flexibility. There's several steps that are outlined in the code. The first step in this process after we declare a vacancy is providing notice. In the notice, there will be an application process, or the notice will describe an application process for receiving names and soliciting names. The next piece is interviews before council, which are done in a public meeting. Council, many of you went through this process when we filled the District 6 position not long ago. Let's see, then the next step is a vote of the majority of the remaining members of council. That can happen during that meeting, the same meeting. These can be in separate meetings. I'll have a timeline this will make a little bit more sense next. And then after the vote, then there is a swearing in. The primary issue that I'm seeking direction on today is whether to appoint quickly, i.e. April, or whether you all want to wait until after the May primary election. Next. Thank you. So this is the potential timeline. So we mapped it out, which hopefully will give you a little bit better sense of how this process could work. You can see that we've already passed the notice of resignation, the date of the vacancy, and then today declaring a resolution, March 19th. At your direction, we will put notice in newspapers and provide a 1 to 2 week application period. This is something that council has some flexibility. Basically, all of these deadlines or dates that I'm going to be going through now have some flexibility around them. And you could leave these questions up to staff or provide us direction, I should note. The next is then we'll have an end of the application deadline. So theoretically, that could be April 9th, and we could have a meeting for the interviews as early as April 9th. As you know, in the green, we suggested having all 3 of those other portions of the vacancy filling process in one single meeting. So again, the interview, the vote to appoint, and the swearing in can all be in the same meeting. They can all be in separate meetings as well. And then note, we have the May 19th primary election. And then in the orange, we have another option for dates, which would be if we wanted to wait and have the interviews after the May primary election. And then we could move forward pretty quickly after that with filling that appointment, or with making the appointment. We have until June 11th. That's our total timeline. So code requires us to make that appointment, fill the appointment by June 11th. And then to be clear, this is this is to fill the term, the current Metro Council President term, which ends the first Monday of January 4th, 2027. Happy to answer any questions on that. And so this is, and then, so next slide, please. Okay, so we have 3 potential options for you. The first option is to appoint after the May primary election. The second option is, and we have some suggested language for you, but this can be changed. I'm happy to help. Option 2 is appoint as soon as reasonably possible, which would be, we believe we could do it as soon as April. And then the third option is you just make the timeline at the acting president's discretion. So we would essentially strike paragraph 3 in the resolution before you. I'll note that last one, we talked about potential conflicts of interest. That creates no potential conflict of interest because, as Councillor Wong already stated, he is not going to be applying for the position. Happy to answer any questions. And that's the end of my presentation, but happy to walk you through those options.
Okay, thank you. Let's start with questions for Kristen, Councilor Rosenthal.
I assume that option 1, the intent is to amend the resolution to meet as soon after the May 19th election as possible. Is that the intent? I mean, it just says after the election, but or do we need to set a deadline on that as well?
It's up to council discretion and what direction you want to provide to staff. So we could do it as quickly as possible. Again, we have until June 11th, so we have to do it before June 11th.
Okay.
And I will note, we have a pretty busy council calendar coming up in April and May because of budget. So we're going to be trying to make the timeline work as best as possible. And again, it will depend on applicants' schedules, council schedules, when we have quorum, all of those things. So we can do it as quickly as possible, or you can leave it to council.
But it has to be before June 11th.
Yes, yes. So if you were to choose option 1, we would have to do it between May 19th
and June 11th.
And June 11th.
That would actually be a more correct amendment.
Yeah.
Any additional questions for staff? Okay, it says I'm supposed to do public comment on this agenda item. So, Anne, maybe reread the procedures again. Is that accurate?
Yes, Acting Council President, just Metro's customary process is that we will take public comment when there is that on resolutions. And so it was just a note because of sort of the...
Use the mic or open the mic, please.
I'm sorry, Councilor Nolan, can you repeat that?
The mic wasn't active. Couldn't hear her.
I apologize, it's on now.
My apologies. I didn't realize that. Thank you. Acting Council President Huang, the typical process for Metro is to take public comment where public comment is, in the room on resolutions or online. And so it was just a note here that this may be one of public interest, so to remind us that we should take public comment if anyone has any.
All right, well, let's reread the procedures.
Happy to do so. If you are testifying on resolution number 26-5584, now is the time to do so. If you're testifying in person, please sign up by filling out a blue card from the back of the room and bringing it up to me. If you're testifying on Zoom or by phone, please sign up by raising your hand using the reactions or more menus or by dialing *9. When it is your turn to testify, I'll call your name or phone number. For those on Zoom, click accept to be promoted to a panelist. Your Zoom window will close briefly before you rejoin as a panelist, and you can turn on your camera if you'd like. Testimony is limited to 3 minutes, and the timer begins when you begin speaking. If you are testifying in person, there are timers located at the testimony table, on the wall, and on the digital screen. Please state your name for the record before testifying. You do not need to give your physical address. And we have one person signed up to testify here in the chamber. We have Chris Christensen. Mr. Christensen, you're welcome to come up to the testimony table.
Welcome back.
Thank you again, Interim President Wang and council members and Metro staff, and thank you for clarifying that. I initially wasn't aware that public testimony would be held on this item. So I want to boil it down here. As I declared earlier, I am a candidate in the upcoming May primary election, so I want to state that clearly up front. And obviously, Councilor Gonzalez is also a candidate. So the way this is going to pan out, and I would hope that the Metro Council would recognize that waiting until after the May primary is probably the best way to go, because if Councilmember Gonzalez does receive more than 50% of the vote, he will be essentially named the next president. Now, if he doesn't receive more than 50% of the vote in the May primary, it goes on to the November election, in which case it creates somewhat of a conflict for the other candidates. So if there are two candidates that advance after the May primary, then the second candidate is going to be at a distinct disadvantage if Councilmember Gonzalez is declared the interim president. So I would strongly suggest that that not be an option that is declared. I would think that someone else who competent on the council would take that interim role between the period of May and November until the final decision is determined. Now, if Councilmember Gonzalez does come out with 50% or more of the vote in May, as Sophie Peel with Willamette Week predicted, then I think it's a foregone conclusion that Councilmember Gonzalez should be the president that's appointed, because that's a very important role. We need to get somebody in there as quickly as possible, but there is a distinct disadvantage to the other candidate that would perhaps advance in the November election. I hope that's myself, of course, and if either myself or Councilmember Gonzalez does not get 50% of the vote, then there's going to be a long period of time there when the voters are going to have to decide. And again, it would be a distinct disadvantage for the secondary candidate if Councilmember Gonzalez were declared the interim president in that role. So I would just have you guys consider that in your decision-making process, and I look forward to the electoral process to determine who's going to be the next leader of the Metro Council. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Assuming no one else is coming up. So
I see no hands raised. Thank you.
great. We'll close public testimony. Councilors, before we take a motion on the resolution, let's have a discussion about the preferred timeline for the appointment. Again, the primary question is whether councilors would like to fill the vacancy as soon as possible, in April in the fastest timeline, or wait until after the May 19th primary. After that discussion, we'll then entertain a moment for the resolution as introduced so that we have a time frame completed in paragraph 3. I think I also want to note right now that not for today, but one of the duties of the council president are to propose committee assignments. I think we'll have another discussion for that. There are a number of vacancies right now due to President Peterson's departure that may weigh into your considerations for this process as well. But I think after this declaration of vacancy, I'll be proposing some changes as required to committee assignments to make sure we have coverage over the next weeks to end of year sort of thing. So just weigh that in mind. But I think let's have that convo first on timeline. I don't know if everyone wants to say their piece, or let's just go with hands raised. Councilor Rosenthal.
I'll move adoption of the resolution as written, realizing that it has to be amended to fill in the blanks one way or the other. But isn't that appropriate? Or do we have to make the amendment? We can't make an amendment until we have the resolution on the board.
Right. Let's just do council discussion first before we get to that amendment.
Okay.
Did you have any preferences, thoughts? Maybe we'll start with you.
Then I'll just make one comment on the on timing. it seems that we're in a sweet spot in terms of timing. We've established the RPOC, we've established the Future Vision Commission, and they are up and running, although they will be up and running. And so we don't have to make decisions on those. And we have a critical decision that's coming up in late June regarding the MTIP and regarding the Interstate Bridge Project. So we seem to have a bit of a sweet spot where a lot of critical things have been put in place or don't need to be resolved immediately.
Understood. Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much. I have the distinct honor of having been through 2 appointment processes on the other side of the dais. I didn't get either of them, so maybe I have a unique perspective here. But I would suggest that it would be most appropriate to do an appointment after the election, informed by the results of the election. I obviously feel the pressure of all the work that needs doing. And now there are fewer players of us here to do that work. But I also had to run against an appointed incumbent who was appointed within the window of the election. And that felt distinctly unfair. And I don't think did a service to my community, nor do I really think it did a service to this organization. So I'm pretty wedded to moving with haste the second we are done with May 19th.
Thank you. Councilor Simpson.
Thank you so much, Acting Council President Wong. I am in the mindset that we don't need to rush this. To Councilor Rosenthal's point, we've solidified a number of key committees and processes that are up and running and are stable. I'm in the mind also that we should wait until after the May election and make our choice stand. And really, it's not our choice at that point. It's the choice of the people and what the people have dictated to us. And so that's where my mind is at.
Thank you. Councilor Nolan or Gonzalez, would you like to weigh in? Councilor Nolan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I would agree with Councilors Lewis and Simpson. I think it's respectful to the voters, since we are so close to the election, to let them make this decision instead of us.
Thank you.
I'm in agreement.
Okay. Well, I'll entertain a motion on resolution number 26-5580.
Move adoption. Nolan moves adoption.
Okay. Is there
Councilor Huang, if I may interrupt here, I think what we need to do, since there's a blank in the resolution, this is sort of the opposite of what we generally do. But I would propose that you ask for a motion to amend resolution number 26-5584 to fill in the blank in paragraph 3 with the phrase, quote, after the May 19th, 2026 primary election. And then once there's a second on that, vote on that amendment, and then vote on the resolution as amended.
That makes sense. Thank you. Okay. Is there a motion to amend the resolution 26-5584? And you can just say the option as listed here that you would like to support.
What Carrie said.
What Carrie said. Okay. So it was moved by Councilor Nolan. Was there a second?
Second.
Second from Councilor Simpson. Under option 2, the resolution would be amended to say
Option 1.
I'm sorry, yes. Option 1. We would fill in the blank in paragraph 3 with the phrase after the May 19th, 2026 primary election.
Correct, and now you could have any discussion on that motion, and if not, then ask Ann to call the roll.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Okay. Ann, could you please call the roll?
Yes, absolutely. Councilor Lewis?
Aye.
Councilor Rosenthal?
Aye.
Councilor Simpson?
Aye.
Councilor Nolan?
Yes.
Councilor Gonzalez?
Aye.
And Acting Council President Huang.
Aye. The motion passes. Okay, well, I'm going to be working with staff over the coming weeks.
Acting President Wong, if I may, we need to now vote on the resolution as amended. So you
Okay.
need a motion and a second for the resolution as amended.
Thank you.
And we'll call that vote.
Okay, is there a motion on resolution number 26-5584 as amended?
I move to adopt the resolution as amended.
Nolan
Yes.
seconds.
Okay, it's moved by Councilor Rosenthal, seconded by Councilor Nolan. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, let's move to a roll call vote.
Counselor Rosenthal,
Yay.
Counselor Nolan,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Gonzalez,
Yes.
Counselor Simpson,
Aye.
Acting Council President Huang.
Aye. Resolution passes. Okay, well, thanks for all the procedural acrobatics. So colleagues, I'll be working with staff over the coming weeks to make sure the position is posted online and in appropriate channels for distribution. And then I'll update you on the process after that. Carrie, maybe you can speak real briefly about kind of like what's required of the interview process, and if my colleagues have any preferences on how we want to run that. We're going to have a few minutes of discussion on that.
Certainly. So councilors, the code does require that the application or the opportunity be posted in a newspaper of general circulation, as well as sort of other appropriate means. That would typically include things like what should you submit and
You're gonna be in Buckhead, right?
by when do you need to submit it. As to the actual interview process, the code simply requires that an interview be conducted before council. And so since it needs to be before all of council, that would be in a public meeting. The council could be as simple as just seeking statements for those applicants who applied. You could also come up with a series of questions if you desired, to do that. As Chief of Staff Dennis noted, it is possible, and in fact, council has pretty routinely done this with past appointments, to hold the interview and the vote on the same day.
Hey, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but we can't hear anything online. We didn't hear like the last 45 seconds.
Oh dear,
It's not your fault, Carrie. I tried to mute Counselor Simpson, and I believe I muted the room. One moment.
Okay.
Counselor Simpson, are you able to hear me?
Excellent. Councilor Simpson, perhaps I could ask you to tell me where my voice went out so that I know how to rewind my tape.
You were like very much into like the first few words and then it just cut out, so.
Okay, so I will just start sort of at the top again to repeat, the first step as Kristen Dennis went over is to provide notice of the opportunity in the newspaper and other appropriate places that would typically sort of lay out the timelines by which people would need to submit any letter of interest or application. I didn't say this in the beginning, but the application is also not specified in the code. It can be as simple as writing a letter of interest and identifying sort of qualifications for the position. After that, the code does require that council conduct an interview of all applicants. So that would need to be in an open public meeting because it's required to be before all of council. The next step after that is to vote to appoint someone to the position. Those last two steps have commonly been combined by Metro Council such that the interview and the vote to appoint occur on the same day. And then as noted, if desired, the person could actually take their oath of office that same day as well. Those three steps can be separated or they can be combined. I think I did say, actually, now that I recall pausing, that with respect to the interview questions, which I think Acting Council President Huang was one of your questions, the code is not specific as to what the nature of the interview is. So in past, council has come up with some questions. It could also be as simple as having the applicant sort of make a statement of interest for the position, which is also common before other local governments.
And Carrie, does everyone that applies have to be interviewed publicly, or Is it like final interviews?
No, the way I interpret the code, all applicants must be interviewed before council. And then the process for voting is, in order for someone to be eligible for appointment, there needs to be a nomination and a second for that person. So not all applicants will be voted on, but all applicants must be interviewed.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Colleagues, are there any guidance that you might have on types of questions? Do you want to keep it like a really simple application? Leave it at my discretion. Any specific questions you want to ask, Councilor Lewis?
Sure, thank you. I do think that the opportunity for folks to put their best foot forward generally comes more in a cover letter that might address specific topics than to ask people to do essay responses. That would be my recommendation, that we ask for a cover letter and can actually say, could you address certain things?
Okay, good feedback. Anything else?
Mr. Chair.
Councilor Nolan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think Councilor Lewis has made a great suggestion. I would encourage us to consider putting a limit on the number of pages that that letter might contain.
Also a great suggestion.
2 pages, something like that.
I'm sorry, did you say 2 pages?
I'm putting a number out there.
All right. Short cover letter with enough space. Got it. Anything else?
Success in this business means saying what you need to say in very few words.
All right, any other feedback on this process that I should take back? Okay, thank you, colleagues. And again, we'll have a little more discussion on committee assignments in the very near future. Okay, let's move on then to COO communication.
Thank you, Acting President Wong. I just wanted to report back today. Yesterday, Craig Stroud, our General Manager of Visitor Venues, and I had an opportunity to be on a panel in front of the Sport Oregon Board of Directors. Sport Oregon released an economic report, the first of its kind, really looking at the impact of spectator sports on the economy in Oregon. It was a fascinating presentation that Eco Northwest did, talking about how sports really it isn't just a local sector economy impact or a traded sector impact, it's both because of the jobs and infrastructure that it requires to put on sporting events, but then there's also this exchange in other places. Some of the top line numbers that I thought you might be interested in, and if you want to hear more, I was thinking perhaps we would request to have them come to a work session to present this information to council. But just looking at spectator sports, so not including participatory sports like some of the convention, like volleyball tournaments and things like that we have. So just spectator sports in Oregon, there's 3.9 million attendees, 1.3 million non-local visitors, and 223,000 hotel room nights. And again, that is a very conservative figures that they are putting forward. To put our Expo sports pivot in perspective, we project that after our stabilization phase, if we do the full build out of Halls D and E, we would add 25,000 room nights to that mix. And just doing a little math, that's an 11% bump. So that tells you what an impact the sports investment at Expo could have statewide, not just regionally. So it was really exciting information, and was really honored to be asked to talk about Expo in front of that group. Overall, I think there's just a ton of excitement. Sports is the one bright spot in our economy right now, and there's a lot of energy and hope and excitement about it. That hopefully will help us build momentum as we want to dip our toe in that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Communications. Councilor Rosenthal.
I think I'm going to have a slight disagreement. I think music is also a big, thing in our entertainment world and something we should focus on. But I do want to mention they had the Imagine the River confab yesterday, and there were a lot of people in attendance and a lot of people focusing both on the importance from a cultural value as well as also the importance from an economic value of developments along the river and potential developments along the river. And I'm just, I was encouraged by the number of people there and about the breadth of discussions that occurred. And as you know, we have a considerable stake in the river in various regards. We have Camilla Bluffs, we have interests in the locks, and we also have Willamette Cove. So I think this leads into something that the Metro is concerned about and will continue to be concerned about.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, kudos to the Willamette Falls Trust, 1803 Fund, and Eco Trust for convening that event. It was, great. I think Metro got a lot of recognition for all our attention and investments, thanks to voter-approved measures along the river. So also, I got to set the stage in the first panel, and then Councilor Lewis moderated a panel with the local mayors. That was a great event. Councilor Lewis.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I just want to lift up that event yesterday. Is so significant for the region. And obviously the work that Metro has done undergirds all the projects that were talked about. And the point of the day is that we're working on disparate projects, but some of the processes and funding and connectivity are all the same fibers. Also wanted to let my colleagues know I missed Tuesday at the invitation of State Director Brian Guinea. I was at the HUD field office in downtown. There were between 40 and 50 folks involved with housing and homelessness. And we were hearing from folks from the administration. And I do think it's important to relay back the message that was heard loud and clear. Funding availability is no longer going to be stable. We are looking at a more competitive process, and we're looking at funding buckets moving away from a lot of long-term rental assistance, and that'll be limited to about a third. A third of funding will be for treatment, addiction, mental health, behavioral health system work for folks experiencing homelessness and crisis. And then the last third will be transitional housing. Transitional housing is something that we've not even really contemplated, something we haven't done. The federal government hasn't invested in it. We haven't invested in it in the region for a long time. So we should put our thinking hats on and think about ways that we can respond not only to the direction that the feds are going, agree or disagree, we need the federal funding, but also with our local funds, being ready to catch the programs that have year over year received reliable funding and will no longer be secure. So
thanks for that update.
That's my takeaway. We talked for 2 hours, but that's it.
Councilor Rosenthal, did you have another item? No? Okay.
All right. I just forgot to lower my hand, sorry.
Great. Well, seeing no further discussion, the council meeting is adjourned. Our next regular meeting is scheduled for March 31st at 10:30 a.m.